And good evening. It is August 11th, 2014, and I'd like to welcome you to yet another edition of the Columbus Report. I'd like to welcome you all back from a small summer break, but without ado, we are going to bring to the round table from the 29th District, Mr. Lewis Blessing.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Glad you could join us. You're enjoying a summer break. We had a small little hiatus for ourselves as well, but we're back to regrouping and retuning things here in the Columbus Report. Glad you could be the first guest back for our summer vacation.
My pleasure.
We've got a few things to discuss, so of course we've got our things, and if you've got something on your mind to ask Mr. Blessing, please do not hesitate to do so. 825-3971 is our phone number. Live at Waycross is our email. Please bring them in because all questions will be answered tonight. But of course, we're going to start with a discussion we're going to continue a discussion we had from last time. We met back in May 12th, as a matter of fact. We were just getting ready to see where House Bill 491 was going to go, and that was dealing with the games tax, basically the gaming laws here in the state of Ohio. Of course, we now have our casinos and our racinos and everything else going on. Brought it up, and we were a week away from that, and miraculously it passed about the 22nd, I believe, or 10 days later.
Sounds about right.
And then at that point, we were waiting for what the Senate was going to do. But for those who weren't here in May, 491 was going to accomplish many things to kind of curb the bad side of gaming, from the addiction side a little bit to all the way to the internet cafes as well, correct?
Yes.
We were waiting to see what happens, and it did pass out of the House that time. We're still waiting Senate. What's going on with the Senate side on this here?
Well, it's election season. To be perfectly honest with you, I believe that the Senate just kind of said, hey, we're not going to take on anything controversial. Not that this was controversial, but sure. I think it was easier for them to just say, we'll take it up and lame duck. However, it is part of the governor's MBR, which is the mid-biennial review. I suspect that it will pass the Senate this fall, but pretty much going to have to wait until after the election for that.
Sure. Well, I was going to say, most of it is probably going to be contingent on that. And it's kind of unfortunate because it does set up so many things, and I know that you were really pleased with the way things were turning out with this as well. We're bringing in some positive things to what most people were looking at as a negative side.
Yes.
To the gaming industry. You're basically putting regulations on what could become a bad thing in the state.
That's right.
The hardest one, which always was something that we talked about last time, was the internet cafes. I think this was going to be able to quell, if not squash, what was really going on.
That's
here,
right.
Correct?
That's correct.
For those who aren't familiar, you may want to explain the idea of those internet cafes again.
Yeah, the internet cafes were really these, they were just running these little sweepstakes where you would go into like a small area and you'd play these online games that looked like casino games, and you would buy like phone card minutes, and essentially that was how you laundered money into the system and gambled. It got around some of our current laws, and it was just becoming a problem. These places had a lot of crime. It just wasn't a good situation. And also, people in the state of Ohio didn't vote for that. People in the state of Ohio, with the casino amendment to the Constitution, voted for 4 casinos. They didn't vote for the internet cafes. They voted for the 4 casinos in the same way that they have the lottery in the state of Ohio. So, we're just following what the Constitution says, what the voters wanted. So really, 491 just kind of cleans all this up, gives a lot of authority to the Casino Control Commission in the same way that the Division of Liquor Control deals with all alcohol in the state of Ohio. With this, I think this is definitely a step forward. A lot of people say what you will about casinos, having these casinos well operated. A lot of this money goes to education, and at the same time, they go to great lengths in order to ensure that problem gamblers are not coming back, aren't ruining lives, aren't ruining families. I think this is going to be a major win for the state of Ohio.
We were when you're looking at the video cafes and these internet cafes, one thing that comes to mind, and I'm hoping that it may not confuse other people, the difference between these internet cafes and their terminals versus the video VLTs. Totally different. And again, the state has sanctioned the VLTs as well, because that's what was originally going on with the Belterra and everything else. That kind of helped usher in where we are today with the Horseshoe and the like of the other four, or the other three within the state.
That's right.
But again, even when you describe the internet cafes and if you read about them, they don't sound legitimate, I guess you could say. They sound like someone set up an old PC, put it in a corner of a gas station, small family business, and moved it along.
That's right.
And from my standpoint, and if correct me if I'm wrong, some of these places probably wouldn't be zoned for something to that effect, correct?
That sounds right, yeah.
Okay. So obviously, again, 2 crimes being committed at one time. Again, that's just with just with that. Now, when you were saying kind of putting the clamps on the casino control, actually one of the things that 491 did as well is it reduced the commissioner's salary from $60,000 to $30,000 a year. What was the rationale between that?
Oh, yes. Now, with that, originally, it's funny because we had to do something about this. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gotten paid anything. The way the statutes were originally written to go around this a few years back, they were there for 4 years, $60,000 per year. After that, nothing. Well,
wow.
What do you do? The thing is they actually did a lot of the groundwork over the past 4 years on this. But now, I mean, you're talking meeting once a month. It's not a full-time position.
Okay.
And this was actually agreed upon by the Casino Control Commission, which kind of surprised me. I had to ask them, are you guys, it sounds like you're willingly taking a pay decrease and you're okay with it. Is that correct? And they said, yes. Okay, well, we'll let the taxpayers keep more of their money in that case. So the impetus behind that was to just, pay them, a good salary on top of what they're doing with the rest of their lives, but not the $60,000. That's a lot for the amount of work that they're going to be doing going forward.
And what will they be doing going forward if we may delve a little bit more into that?
Well, that remains to be seen.
Well, I was going to say it does have other things. They
will promulgate, I'm sure, a lot of rules when this actually ends up getting passed in the fall.
And I'm looking here in things that go along, and we can go through some of these. It provides guidelines for skill-based game machines.
Right.
Specifies that appeals be heard in the Franklin court. So it's going right to Columbus right away.
Right.
As opposed to keeping it. I'm assuming the original idea was to keep it within the same areas in which the casinos were.
Right. And then they've wanted to centralize it. It saves a lot of money.
Sure. That makes perfect sense. Obviously, the pay cut and requires one member of the Lottery Commission, the State Lottery Commission, to have the experience in the area of gambling addiction and its treatments.
That is correct.
So that's going in with that whole idea of the kind of like the federal side of it.
That's right.
With the addiction, and which you see a lot of if you go to the casino as well as on the billboards themselves.
Right.
Is that state mandated or was that federal mandated? That must be placed within there. That you see that treatment is available. That it's come have fun.
That is a very good question.
Okay.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, I've always been curious about that as well, because you go to the casinos and you see that, but is it who puts that regulation first and foremost?
Well, I can tell you with problem gambling that the casinos go to great lengths on their own to avoid this. I mean, they don't need the bad press. I mean, the amendment itself a few years back, I think it passed 52-48 or so. So they know that they have to be, very good players, very good people in the community here to, keep this going. So, and if you've ever been, you've been in a casino.
Yes.
I mean, it's very, very high tech. They're able to look and see who these people are when they're coming, to the casino, and they're able to say, no, you're not allowed in here because there's been a problem. We're not going to deal with it. So it's certainly a good thing. There is one other amendment that was put in there that this was by Speaker Pro Tem Matt Huffman, and that had to do with the penalties for a lot of these things. And originally it was changing it so that it was now a felony for a first-time offense. He wanted to knock that back to a misdemeanor on the first time, and then after that, and this is not complying with the casino and gambling law.
Sure.
So what that will do, obviously, I mean, if you get a felony, I mean, your life is, I mean, it changes a lot. It's very difficult to get a job. You know,
Especially for a first time.
That's correct. And as he explained to me, he's an attorney, you know, we've already got enough people that have felonies that can't find jobs. We don't need to be creating more of these people on the first go. So Casino Control Commission and the prosecutors around the state were kind of hesitant about that because they said, you know, it makes it difficult to go after these people if all we're going to get is a misdemeanor. But we felt that it was a fair compromise and put it in.
Well, and again, these are just things that we're looking forward to. And again, it could be not until fall till we see anything
Correct.
moving forward to this. But
And the Senate is definitely going to put their signature on it too.
Oh,
so.
sure. If you were to look, and I know you talked to that side, can you foresee anything that may be a blockade and or something that they may say, this might need to be added?
Not really at the moment. I'm trying to think, because there was really, I'm thinking, only 2 people that voted against it in the House.
Yeah, I was going to say, I believe it was, it was an 83 too, so.
Yeah. I don't know. It depends. I mean, there's a lot of people that think that, you know, the internet cafes ought to have the same rights and privileges as the casinos. But again, that's a minority opinion, and I would still argue that constitutionally we have, you know, our enumerated types of gambling in the state of Ohio. May not be a perfect system, but
Sure.
That's what we're sworn to uphold.
Well, and before we get to our next topic, you did make mention that obviously a lot of this is going towards the schools, which everyone
Yes.
says, you know, that's the one thing the state has been neglecting.
Local governments as well.
That's a wonderful thing to hear, that we're
Yes.
actually getting this. Are we going back into those funds directly, or are we going into special funds that are helping special programs, or how is that being allocated?
That hasn't even
been
brought up.
discussed?
Correct.
See,
Still new. So
still moving forward, but at least we're looking to see that there is progress and change happening in a
Right.
positive direction, in which we've been unfortunately facing for the last couple of years.
That's correct.
But that's just on the downside. On the good side, we have some other things to discuss, and I think this is going to actually change an outlook that I think we're starting to see down in your area and in the area in which we live, called Hamilton County and downtown Cincinnati. House Bill 598, which was brought up by yourself and Representative Driehaus, stating that the creation of entertainment districts. You bring it up as the idea of something that's very similar to New Orleans.
Right. Or Beale Street in Memphis.
Okay. Yeah. I do know Beale Street, so I can attest for that. I guess my first question is, why did it take so long? I mean, we were just discussing here earlier that a year ago we might not have even been thinking of discussing it, but actually you and I had.
Yeah.
But if you go from Cincinnati a year ago to Cincinnati today,
Yeah.
is a completely different animal. And actually a very embracing area for those who want to have a place to enjoy themselves while they're downtown.
Right.
And this will help in that same idea. Now, for those who don't understand or haven't read the bill, what exactly would you consider an entertainment district?
Okay. Well, let me start out by saying that this bill actually was Senate Bill 116, which was Senator Eric Kearney, Cincinnati.
Yes. Right
good
down
Good local guy, St. X grad. We won't hold that against him. The viewers, I am a LaSalle grad, so
yes,
a little bit of a rivalry
little rivalry.
But really what a municipal entertainment district is it loosens the open container laws within a certain, defined district within a municipality. So for example, as written, the legislation says that by population, certain, like say for example, City of Cincinnati, They have over 350,000 residents, so they can have up to 3 municipal entertainment districts. The way it works is each municipal entertainment district is half mile by half mile, so half mile squared. You have to have no fewer than 4 A2 or D permit holders. Let's just say no less than 4 bars in there. And it's got to be, located, of course, within the municipal corporations, for example, City of Cincinnati. But once you get to that point, once you have all this in place, assuming this bill were to pass, you'd have one of those bar owners would have to then petition the mayor. So the mayor would get the petition, and in 30 days he'd say, okay, well, I like this, I'm going to pass it on to the legislative authority, which is the city council.
Okay.
The city council would then post notices in the Enquirer. They're required to do that on 2 different weeks in a 30-day period. If all is good at that point, within 70 days, 75 days of when the mayor first got it, they will have a vote on it. And if it passes, that becomes a municipal entertainment district, and you have the loosened open container rules on that. There are some quirks to that. I mean, you can't just walk in, obviously, with your own drinks and just say, hey, I'm going to party in the municipal entertainment district free of charge. And you can't bring your drink into one of the bars there from another bar. Just you got to consume it there or outside. Yeah, I think this bill has a great chance of doing a lot of good for the city of Cincinnati. As we were talking about earlier, it'd be nice to actually have made it into Bakersfield at once. It's last time I tried to get in there was a 2-hour wait. The people want to go down there. I mean, the entertainment is there. We can expand on this. I mean, Cincinnati, as you were saying, is just completely different.
It's a completely different entity. I mean, people are utilizing green space. People are utilizing the facilities that are there. People feel more invited to be there. There is, as you say, I got lucky to get into Bakersfield. I got lucky. That doesn't mean I'm going to get lucky downtown anywhere else, but there are many restaurants down there now that are starting to really pop up and show life. And when you start having that type of synergy when it comes to that, from all the way to the river to, quite frankly, pretty much all the way to Findlay Market,
right?
That's a hefty, I mean, obviously a little more than a half mile there.
Yeah.
So as we discuss these half-mile districts, the city could have up to 3 in our vicinity. Obviously, the banks probably being one, OTR probably being a second. I'm speculating if they chose to use it, quite possibly the casino area to maybe clean that up.
Right.
Of course, I'm trying to do logistically, how far up would half a mile be? Would it ever make it to any of them touch Fountain Square?
Good question. Without a map in front of me, it's tough to say. But you know what? I don't see why it wouldn't. I mean, the half mile squared is a big area. But I mean, even if you didn't do Fountain Square, I mean, there's other areas. There's certainly Mount Adams.
Yeah.
Although I think the residents might. I mean, that's kind of quasi, residential, so they may have a problem with that. But I mean, yeah, there's Fountain Square Casino. I wish I had thought of that in discussions with Cincinnati Chamber, because I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, because again, we were discussing earlier that you're starting to see a lot of change and a lot of cleaning up and making it an inviting place to go.
Correct.
The entire area by the casino is still very new, don't get me wrong, but it's still an area in which you want to be entertained. You want to still go out there, but you still have to walk a little bit if you wanted to, maybe didn't want to eat inside there, but wanted to go elsewhere. You had to do a little bit of a walk.
Right.
But again, that doesn't mean there are a few vacant areas that could still be renovated and redone, as they have been doing over the Rhine and the like.
That's right.
So we're seeing this change. Now, the wonderful thing that, as we were discussing earlier, and the thing that I was pointing out, is that the handshaking that is going on amongst those co-sponsoring this bill is quite amazing, considering you have spanning not only Mallory and Reese, which is a part of the constituency down here in
Right.
Hamilton County, but you have one from Clinton County, one from, well, technically two from Butler, technically two from Warren, Claremont, and Lorain County.
Mm-hmm.
And from both sides of the aisle,
Yes.
which again is, as we all know,
What you want.
what you want, and not usually seen,
That's right.
especially in something like this,
That's
because
right.
now we're changing a cultural idea, really,
Yeah.
especially something that's not been embraced heavily downtown.
That's right.
And looking at this, and my brain's starting to really kind of go, thinking like, well, now maybe if you don't do that, maybe if we don't do the casino area, you do the Aronoff area, but then over the Rhine might hit that area.
Ooh,
So yeah,
that's another one,
exactly. So you've got the off Broadway area, and you've got these great areas. The open container loosening of this, obviously we're not going to see everybody just carrying beer bottles and wine bottles and everything else
correct.
around. There will be tightening rules on this. My first thought was, is everyone at that point going to be required to have gated areas? Because is that not the law currently stating that if you wanted to serve alcohol outside, it must be within a...
That has actually been brought up. We're still in discussions with how we want to accomplish that. But yes, you're absolutely correct with that. Some other issues that we've brought up, and of course, some of the players that are going to be brought to the table. You're going to have members from law enforcement. Obviously, that they have to be.
They have to be part of this.
3CDC, the Reds, the Bengals, Cincinnati Chamber. They're all heavily involved with this. And besides the law enforcement aspect, when people are partying, typically somebody's going to get hurt. So this falls, into what happens with liability. And this is where the legislation needs to be tweaked, I believe. During the application process, it is actually one of the A2 or D permit holders that actually turns in the application. So they're technically designated the municipal entertainment district.
Okay.
So are they liable for everything in the municipal entertainment district, or how do you determine that? It's murky, so that has to be cleared up. But I think that we can work with this. Obviously, New Orleans and Beale Street have done so for years. Mm-hmm. But it can be worked out. But again, a lot of work needs to be done with that.
And obviously, you have models that you
That's
can
right.
go back to. What are some of the things that you went to in looking at this to kind of base it upon? That like these are good points to start with,
Right.
that are able to really be incorporated here, and because realistically, this sounds like it's going to really start down here,
Right.
and spread throughout the state.
I would agree. Yeah.
I mean, my first thought as well is when you're looking at an entertainment district, does that also require that area after a certain amount of time, a certain hour,
Yeah.
to be closed off, to be barricaded? And at that point, if that's the case, does that help or hinder?
Right.
Do people really want to see, mounted police and barricades in a half-mile area and people not being able to drive down whichever way?
Right. Not to mention the traffic. That would be a problem as well going around those areas. Right.
But yet you're also looking at the safety of those around.
Right.
You had brought up about those being the filer.
Yes.
And to start that, how many participants, I can say, do you need to have within that district to flourish? Does it have to be one, or
You need at least the 4 A2 or D
4?
permit holders.
That's right. Okay.
Right.
So, say for example, let's take the banks for example,
Right.
Because I can name a few places off the top of my head. Not that I'm not advertising here. I'm just saying I just can remember them quicker. Let's say Moraline obviously is probably going to say yes, because they've got that whole green space area.
That's right.
They've already kind of, if you want to say, kind of started in a way.
Right.
You've got Toby Keith, and
Yard House maybe?
Yard House, and let's throw in Oh, let's throw in the wine guys. So we got 4. Banks is set. But let's just say Crave at the corner says, I don't want to be a part of it. Does that hurt, or does that just mean that they're not going to be a part of this?
Right.
Does it mar that area in any means?
That's one of the things that needs to be tweaked. Currently with the law, it's the way the application works, it's not defined in that situation. I would think you'd have to have some sort of unanimous group of permit holders say we want this. If there were somebody that was off to the side, I would imagine they'd be just drawn out. That would be my thinking with it. If they happen to be in the middle of some district like this, it's anybody's guess whether I guess you'd form a donut around it. But again, it's something we're definitely looking at. And
just thinking again, if by chance you had the 4, and say 2 months later, Holy Grail says, I want to join in. Would it be easy for them to just say, come on in, and they write themselves in on that?
That's something that I would imagine that the council would have to reconsider.
Okay.
And that's probably the best way to do that. I mean, you're electing people to oversee this. If it gets abused in any way, then they can dissolve it. One of the other things that was talked about by the chamber was putting a sunset provision on these, so that it had to be renewed. They didn't have to take, if the council did nothing, it could just expire.
Okay.
And I thought that was a fair provision. It makes sure that there's no craziness, or if there was no political will to stop something, there's a fail-safe in place.
And it sounds like if restaurant and bar owners know exactly what's going on and what they're allowing themselves to get into,
sure,
then there would be really no worry if it would lapse or expire, other than maybe a change of ownership or something to that effect. But it kind of again goes to that idea of ownership and who is the responsible party here.
Right.
Now, again, obviously, this is going to go through a couple chains of command, obviously going from the mayor to the council.
Right.
And that way. Do you think there's enough fingers in pies, or is there too many fingers in pies when it comes to this? I mean, I'm seeing this as something that needs to kind of be heavily regulated in the fact that you're dealing with something that could quite possibly harm someone.
Right.
So what is the outlook on gaining somebody's idea of that area and keeping the tightening with that chain? How far do you think that would go?
Can you explain that a little bit?
Okay, I'm trying to, because I'm getting a message here, sure. and something else. So I apologize. I was a little misstepped there. But what I'm saying is that we're hoping that again we're following this chain of command.
Right.
And again, a lot of people are always worried there's too much government involved.
Yes.
But when you have something that could quite frankly harm someone. Yeah. To find that again, because everyone likes to do it, whose finger do we point and blame first?
Right.
Do we have too many, or should there be another safeguard in there? Yeah.
Well, I think it actually is pretty good where it is with the city council. I mean, these people are voted in. If it's really bad, they can always just dissolve it. Sure. To sit there and think that the city council would all be somehow in collusion with this and weren't going to get rid of it, even though people were getting hurt, people get voted out on things like that. So I think the right safeguards are in place. I mean, I don't really know what else you would do. I mean, this legislation, as you were talking about earlier, why wasn't this done years ago? I mean, it's the states controlled the laws. I mean, you're right. It should have been the local governments controlling things like this. I think the city of Cincinnati and the council are perfectly capable of dealing with this. So, and actually, that now that I think about that was another amendment. See, I stuff to keep them all straight. That we were trying to put in there because Southwest Ohio is unique in that we have some very gigantic townships down here. Coleraine and Greene and Anderson come to mind.
Fair, yes.
Right. They, both Coleraine and Greene, I'd have to check Anderson, but they both have more than 50,000, which is the minimum threshold for a single municipal entertainment district. However, it's not written as such that it's, it's not just, it's a municipal entertainment district. It has to be within a city by definition. We'd like to change that, for townships so that Coleraine could have one if they wanted it. If I brought it up with them, sure. Mm-hmm. Have they been excited about it? It's, to them, it's like, we're already kind of doing good on our own. Yeah. That's fine. They don't have to put it in. Same way that Cincinnati, if, there's enough people that don't want this, they still have the ability to do so, but they don't have to. And
again, we're looking at something that, again, I pointed out all the co-sponsors because I wanted to show the Southwest tie and how much it is really benefiting here. But if this were to pass, this goes statewide. It opens the door to Columbus, which I don't know the population, but I can imagine. I'm already imagining the places that you could go with that one. And Short North is a clear answer. German Village. You can probably you could probably go as far as up to, well, not contingent, obviously, but like Easton Town Center, stuff like that. Yeah. So you've got all those. It could really help Cleveland.
Oh, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. Yeah, and there's actually a lot of smaller cities around Cleveland that have that threshold. It might give them an added boost.
Sure. Dayton could use a boost as well. I mean,
I think we all could.
Yeah, I agree with that. But you've got the Dragon Stadium down there, and a great area down there. Downtown in general, just would be a great way to do it. And I can't leave out Toledo, so so it would have benefit at least the larger cities to that effect. Again, this is just being introduced and just being worked on. Obviously, this is probably something that you'll go back when session starts, or are we going to hold off after election on this one?
This will, again, we're not in session again, and probably until after the election. We might show up to discuss a few things, but I doubt this is on anybody's agenda until at least after the election.
That's unfortunate.
It is.
I normally don't say that, but this is something that's, again, been years in the making. Mm-hmm. And again, it's interesting to see something that is that could change economically how things are looked, and it's starting here in our area as opposed to starting in Columbus, where something like this, if you would have asked me this 5 years ago, especially 10 years ago when I was really in Columbus, I would have said that's where you're going to start. That's where you're going to see this change. And to know that, the banks and OTR and all that area could be affected by this bill here, just starting here.
That's right. Wonderful.
Well, we are at least, yes, we are halfway through our time here. We still have things to discuss, and if you'd like to join in, please do so. 825-3971 is our phone number. live@waycross.org is the email. Please get in contact with us. We'd love to have those comments and questions brought in this way. Now, of course, there are a number of bills that were co-sponsoring before the break, and so we kind of we'd like to bring them up again. We were discussing education.
Yep. Is this the college credit?
It sure is.
So.
Yeah, House Bill 593, and this is going in with your credit hours and the overload fees.
That's right.
It's interesting to see that, again, people who want to advance in their education and go a little bit over those 18 hours can get penalized.
That's right.
At least currently. This bill is saying that would be prohibited, and prohibiting the states to do so. Again, I have to ask, why were we penalizing students? I mean, this is, and mind you, I will say these are for state institutions. These are, so Ohio State, OU, things like that.
Correct.
I'm not used to seeing this because I went to a private school. So to me, this doesn't, I am completely shocked and amazed that over 18 credit hours, if you go above 18 credit hours currently, you could be, or you might be charged what they're calling an overload fee.
That's right.
I don't know exactly how much an overload fee is, but could hurt any student that's going into class now.
Now, I can explain it in terms of, because I did go to a public college, UC,
Okay.
and UC, when I was there, had a system that if you were under 12 credit hours per quarter, well, now I'm dating myself because it's semesters now, but
Yeah.
At the time, quarter, it was 12 credit hours per quarter. If you were under that, it was part-time. Then there was the 12 to 18 full-time. Anything that you took over 18 credit hours was assessed at the part-time rate, which was, of course, higher than the full-time rate, which, I never was really able to take advantage of, simply because engineering, having the co-op program, you couldn't really maneuver yourself to get ahead that way. However, there's a lot of students that could have shaved, a quarter or two off of their graduation if they had been allowed to do that. And I'm sure the money's not much, but when you're in college, a couple $100 here and there is a lot of money.
That's rent.
That's right. And this is one of these things like the municipal entertainment district thing. You kick yourself and you're like, you're kidding me. How come this wasn't done a long time ago? So yeah, I absolutely support that.
And again, you are of course co-sponsor on this, and again, like you said, why? We are in that area where we want to be well educated. We want a well educated workforce. We want it coming from our state. And if we have something that's already established in this, again, these are those things that may deter a prospective student or a current student because they're able to take that extra course load.
That's right.
How they are, I don't know. They must obviously not sleep. But that's okay. But for those who are able that might be able to take one or two extra classes that don't overload them completely, that could help them get them into the workforce here in our state.
That's right.
And we're hindering that. Again, something to be looked at. This was something that was introduced prior to break.
Right.
And again, I'm going to assume that most of these are probably not going to be looked at until after election completely.
That's right. Yep.
Then we'll move on. No. House Bill 596 is more dealing with the putative father registry. You're, again, co-sponsoring this, which is, again, a very good bill to be going on. I don't believe, if I was doing my research correctly, not every state has this registry already intact.
I don't believe so, yeah.
Which begs my question, why? This is a very interesting bill for those who aren't familiar. It's basically allowing this registry to compile in this database to be able to say about giving up your parental rights or keeping your parental rights.
Right.
Which again amazes me with the amount of people that go through Jobs and Family Services, and I know because we talk about them here on County Fair, that it amazes me that we don't have something like that already.
Right. Yeah, I think that my understanding of this was just to speed up the adoption process, because that has been Representative Palanda's big thing since she's been in office.
And to what degree would that help in the speeding up process? Obviously, if they're already on the registry, they're basically saying, yes, I give up my rights, no, I don't. They can look to this registry and already make that decision, as opposed to pulling it through a long court case.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Again, you have to question, why hasn't something like this been done? I have done, again, a little bit of research on it, and I understand that it takes more because, again, it's more on that father's side than it is on the mother's side on this. I'm assuming it's because most fathers don't either care or, and I don't mean that meanly.
Sure.
I don't. There are some fathers who don't even realize that they may have fathered a child and the mother's gone elsewhere.
That's right.
So it kind of puts us into a very gray area. Again, this was left at the before break in a very preliminary stage, and we don't know exactly where this would go, but it does set up some good work ahead of the schedule. Again, we are at about 18 minutes, so if you're still looking for that question, please bring it in, 825-3971 or live at waycross.org. I can't go without talking, we did a little bit of it, local government fund.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's a bitter term that's been
Yeah.
stated. However, you've kind of mentioned that some money because of that is going to be shifting. How are we seeing some shifting in that coming back to our local governments?
Okay. What I think is going to happen, the real big stuff is going to be coming ahead this coming GA. As you know, in the 129th GA, which I was not there, which was where the local government fund was cut by 50%. Yeah. This past GA, the local government was not cut at all. What happened was, since we had the state of Ohio with House Bill 59, which is our state operating budget, we reduced the income tax by 10% across all tax brackets. So that's huge. But at the same time, to give a tax cut like that, you're going to lose revenue. Right. You have to pay for it in other areas. And then, of course, we had the 50% tax break for small businesses up to the first $250,000 in income. Another huge boon for the state of Ohio. Now, these things, a lot of people think, well, you're cutting taxes. How do you bring more revenue into the state? Well, one of the things that we've tried to do with all of this, with cutting taxes, if you have a low and broad tax base, and of course there's a sweet spot for this, but lower and broader tax base, you will end up bringing in more tax revenue than you would have with a higher tax rate. And this has been shown to be true over, as long as this country's existed. So, as you've seen in the news this past month, it's turned out that when the fiscal year ended in 2014, there was an $800 million surplus. Sure. So a lot of that, I believe, will be returned to local governments next GA and going forward. And that, it certainly makes sense. It's, that it was tough, doing a lot of the cutting, I'm sure, for the 129th. I don't know what their decision process was, but at the same time, they were reeling from one of the greatest recessions this country's seen.
Absolutely. And,
the rainy day fund was, I think, good Lord, it was like $1.78 or something back in, 2010, 2011. But now it's at its maximum, and it's in the billions. I think it's $1.5 billion or so. And
which a lot of us were speculating we would never get to see that again.
That's correct. Yeah. And it's wonderful having that peace of mind there, that money can be used in a pinch. Now, I would be remiss to say that that it was the low broad tax base was completely behind the $800 million surplus. A lot of that was lower than expected numbers of people turning out for Medicaid, because we did have the Medicaid expansion.
Right.
They thought there was going to be a lot more prepared for it, and there was not. So that, Medicaid being our largest spending item in Ohio, clearly when you're not spending as much on that, proportionally that's going to be a huge amount of money compared to the tax cuts doing what they do. But again, I believe that a lot of that money will go back to local governments next GA.
That is a good sigh of relief for many of the places. And again, in your hometown, Coleraine right there, they were hit very severely.
Oh, yeah.
Springfield Township hit very severely. Any of the areas among your constituency.
That's right.
Hit very hard.
That's right. And, it's been difficult. I know that, the last GA killing off the death tax, although I would argue, the state tax.
Sure.
Now, this particular tax, of course, 80% of it went to local governments, 20% went to the state. But at the same time, groups like the Farm Bureau, NFIB, were heavily behind getting rid of that tax, because a lot of these people were, they'd die off, they'd have to sell the farm just to pay for a massive tax bill, because they didn't have the money to do that. Couldn't pass on their businesses generation to generation, and they fought tooth and nail from what I had heard.
Wow.
In the 129th over that. So, yeah, that's one hit that the local government took, or local governments took. But again, my idea is to have as much money going forward, going towards them. At the same time, there's been some bills that try to do some shared service. When you have local governments working together, sharing police and fire, that goes a long way. It streamlines service, makes things a lot cheaper.
And I think that's what we saw a lot of, the idea of what do we work with well, what can we better, and how can to meet in between. And I think you see that with many people trying to stretch tax dollars as far as they can go.
Sure.
and at some point you have to say, when you for example, we can look at two different townships. We have Springfield Township and Coleraine Township, where you know they're both in need of infrastructure changes, and Springfield Township is looking to try to do that in one aspect,
Jed
Z, as well as Coleraine.
That's right.
And they're both looking at it in that same regards. Of course, the state kind of put a little caveat to that as well, and I think made both. Well, any township in the area think if this is something we're going to do, we had to do it in a timetable.
Right.
Yeah. From that standpoint, do you think that those JEDZs? Well, I guess my question is, and maybe you'll be able to help out, and I hope so, to understand what was that change? Why was that as of December, we're done. If you didn't get it, too bad.
There was and now for the record here, that was House Bill 289, Kirk Schuring, which I, of course, with the Hamilton County delegation, because we're such rebels, we all voted against that measure, because here in Southwest Ohio we don't have those problems that Northern Ohio does. What was happening was some of these townships in, say, around the Columbus area were doing these little tax grabs where they would just create a JED-Z around, a very large manufacturer or something like that.
Okay.
And it would be a boon for them. And of course, now all of a sudden, these people are getting hit with an income tax, because that's what a JED-Z does.
Right.
You'll end up having an income tax levied. But in Coleraine, for example, I believe from what I read, the corridor that they want to do is from West Galbraith all the way up to Struble Road.
Struble Road, yes.
And for residents of Coleraine, you're going to get your money back for that. You're not going to be hit with that.
And that's in a form of a rebate, so it is also based
correct.
on the resident. They have to go out and search for that.
Right.
As opposed to, from what I understand, other places that it just kind of happens.
That's right. And that's one of the reasons why I just didn't want to see the JED-Zs go, because it's just another tool that local governments have to raise revenue. And quite frankly, a lot of those tools have been taken away in the last General Assembly.
Well, and if you think about it, there aren't many tools in a township's tool belt.
That's correct.
To be able to generate some type of revenue. Right. So, I mean, you're looking at.
Not to mention, you have to partner with the city.
That was where I was going to say next. That was the hard part for both townships and any township in general. You have to find the right partner, and one that's going to be willing to work with you.
That's correct.
So it doesn't matter where you place that zone.
That's right.
It's the matter of, can you have the handshake? Then, of course, you have to bring it to your public as well, and if they're going to agree with it as well.
That's right.
The unfortunate thing is, however you want to call it, there's still a tax, and most people get frightened by that term.
Understood.
And again, I think the idea of that rebate, or the idea of there is that rebate, you're going to get it back.
That's right.
It's just, again, one of those things in the tool belt that are almost gone. Well, actually, they will be once that hits.
That is correct.
So again, as we go back to that idea of what's happening to local governments, what are obviously we're going to get some money back, hopefully, knock on wood. But what else is there going to be there for the local government to help them 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road? Because I'm hoping we won't have the same problem that we experienced. Let's hope we don't get into a recession or anything to that effect again. But we're looking at trying not to have this happen again, where everyone is scrambling and cutting so thin that services are missed, or a great area to live is now not as great as it used to be.
Right. Because
we're looking for other means of revenue.
That's correct, yeah. And as I said, there were no cuts to the local government fund in the 130th General Assembly. And again, going forward, excess money that we have at the state level should be returned to the local government fund, and it will be, I believe. And if it, in addition to that, it will be returned through of course, income tax cuts as well. I firmly believe that the governor, don't mark my words on this one, but I think that he wants to actually get rid of the income tax in its entirety in the state of Ohio.
That has been a grumbling, and it's not that isn't the first time we've heard that idea, but that's a big undertaking.
Yes, it is.
And especially with him going into election season.
Yes.
That's some may say, is that just a help to get him elected, or is it something that he, I don't want to play the devil here, but that's something to look at. That this has been something it's not as something he just brought up.
Oh yes,
2 weeks ago or whatever. This is something that has been discussed a while ago.
That's right.
We are getting close to the 10-minute mark here, so if you have your last questions, 825-3971, live at waycross.org, because I'm going to open it up to Mr. Blessing here. What's on your docket that's coming up before? Obviously, we know what you're doing. we know you're busy pounding the pavement.
Yep.
There is, make no mistake, you are running again.
Yep.
For your seat.
That is correct.
So your name will be, of course, on the ballot for November. There obviously are got to be some things that you've got to be working towards to finish your term, other than being prepared to quite possibly either hand that seat over or continue moving forward.
That's right.
What are you looking forward to when you reconvene, and then to the end of this year of 2014?
In terms of bills?
Of new bills, anything that obviously there's probably not going to be a lot introduced at that point, but obviously if this happened to be your last crowning moment.
Right.
What are things you're hoping to accomplish before December finishes?
There was a bill that we're still working on, and it's very much in its infancy, and the reason is because of the area, and that is election law.
Okay.
And what it has to do, and it completely bipartisan, talking about people from the Hamilton County Board of Elections, Democrats down there like the idea as well. What it had to do with thus far is you have these observers that really can only start tearing open the ballots, 10 days or so prior to the election.
Okay.
They're not allowed to tabulate them. Can't tabulate them until polls close at 7:30. That's when you can start counting them. However, what they wanted to be able to do was start scanning these, as these ballots as they come in, say 29 days prior to the election. And then, of course, they'd be in like a flash drive or something to that effect. And
sure.
If you talk to the Board of Election people, it's kind of interesting. You have the Democrat lock and the Republican lock on all of this. So what they wanted to be able to do is put, a lot of this stuff goes through the machine, not tabulated, but you can store the flash drive in the vault, and then when election day rolls around, you can just put it in there, have it tabulated, spits it all out. It seems like a minor change, but they have to hire a ton of people because they just watch this mound of absentee ballots and early voting ballots, just getting higher and higher and higher. They can't do anything about it until 10 days before the election, so they have to hire a lot of extra people to deal with it, and it just makes everything take longer and be more expensive.
Well, in other words, it looks to me is a streamlining process.
Correct.
That you're trying, and again, by doing that, does it not help on election night start to see results sooner than what you normally
you would? You would, absolutely.
Because normally, in the past, when we would take a lot of election coverage, it would be great that we'd be there, we'd be waiting, polls close, we're waiting for the first tabulation.
Right.
Well, you wouldn't see anything till 10:30.
That's right.
Whereas if you had something like on a flash drive that you can put in,
Shed a few hours.
You're shedding quite a few hours, and especially if you're able to do. Now you're saying 10 days out. Obviously, you're opening ballots and letting it. You're not necessarily tabulating it. You're just gathering the information.
Right.
I guess it's a semantics on how you really say it, but
correct.
Yeah, you'd be gathering that information.
And there are some issues that need to be worked out, obviously, with this. But
obviously, I mean, where would you be doing this? Is it all stored at the Board of Elections? Where, at that 10-day mark, how often are you doing this? And I can see where it's a good and a bad, because you're going to have people that are going to come back and say, well, you're doing this too soon, or you started this a day before. It becomes a he said, she said.
That's right.
Kind of area. But what do we look for when, again, to help your tabulation and make this a more streamlined area, especially when we're trying to encourage
voting.
voting.
Right. For this, and my plan of attack with this bill, because I mean it's a good idea. It's pretty simple to explain. Just to make sure that there's no, because I mean really election law, obviously this GA has been controversial. Mm-hmm. With this one, my goal has been to obviously have the League of Women Voters at the table, and of course, again, a Democrat joint sponsor on this, so that we know that, hey, there's no tricks, there's no nothing, it's going through, and it's fair. And really, this is pretty much for the Board of Elections people. You know, it is really, really a hassle for them to have to deal with this every year, and it's a lot of money that they don't have.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, their money is our money, you know, so it certainly makes sense.
Well, hopefully we can come back and, quite frankly, discuss this a little bit more. We'll see what happens, but believe it or not,
so.
we have made it to the top of the hour. So we have, as always, I like to make sure that we get the opportunity to give your information out. So if they do have any other questions that they were not able to get to tonight, or were just afraid to, because you don't have to be afraid. It's really not that bad. You can always get a hold of you by snail mail at 77 South High Street on the 11th floor in Columbus, 43215. Give him a call at the office at 614-466-9091, or the new email at rep29@ohiohouse.gov. And the website is on the bottom. You can get all the information about what's going on, press releases, things of that nature, right there for you. Mm-hmm. Mr. Blessing, thank you once again for coming out on a bizarre night, as rainy, as crazy as it is. You made it here. We're glad you're here. And, of course, we're glad that you joined us as well. So, again, thank you once again.
No problem.
My pleasure. Thank you for joining us as well. I'm Jason Grzegorek, Waycross Community Media's Government Access Coordinator, giving you the opportunity to talk to people all here for your districts from here on the Columbus Report. I'm very thankful for having you here, and we'll talk to you again next month, because next month is election season. Our start. We'll see you then. Which is really scary when it's already that time.